Thank you. Okay. So our agenda for tonight, first we're going to introduce our panelists. Then we're going to go through a couple of pre-prepared questions that are like preset. And then throughout the event, if you have a question that you want to submit, you can send your question to Shelby Cartwright, who she can send her like a little message in the chat now so you know who to send it to. And so that way during the event, instead of sending your questions to the whole meeting, you can send them just to Shelby. That way we can compile them and ask them at the end. And then at the end, we'll also give a feedback form so you can tell us what you thought of the event. Yeah, so you can go to the first slide, the next slide. So I'm going to introduce one of our first panelists. So Elizabeth Sherman is an autistic adult and occupational therapist who loves Pittsburgh, gardening, and spending time with their dog, Honey. Elizabeth is also a doctoral student and passionate about centering the lived experiences of autistic folks in research and healthcare. Elizabeth, if you'd like to say hi, and if you want, you can give an image description of yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm a white, non-binary person with short brownish hair, and I have a pink soft turtleneck on, and I'm sitting on a brown couch with my brick fireplace thing behind me. And you might see my dog sometimes, Honey, come in. She's a beagle mix.
The next panelist is Carly. Carly is an autistic speech-language therapist who is passionate about communication and self-advocacy. They enjoy spending time with their household animals, listening to podcasts, and interacting with others in the autistic community. And they've also been my best friend for like 12 years. So, Carly, if you would like to give a visual description of yourself and say hello to everybody.
Sure. Hello, I'm Carly. I am a white person with long brown, brown. I don't know why I checked long brown hair. And I'm wearing a white sweater, and behind me is a white and yellow quilt with some, I think, state flowers, the flower of each state on it.
Next, we have Amira. Amira is a deaf autistic adult with a cochlear implant and third-year MOT student from the University of North Dakota who enjoys cooking, writing, going to parks, and language learning. Amira continues to understand how being neurodivergent impacts her life and connects the effects of other intersections of herself and other marginalized groups in discussions about social justice and healthcare. Amira, welcome. If you could give a visual description of yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Amira. I am a white and Egyptian young adult who has brown hair and a ponytail, and I'm also wearing a gray sweatshirt. And then behind me is a dark purple wall, and yeah, I also wear glasses too.
All right, next we have Joseph Vernon Smith. Joseph is a local Pittsburgher, photographer, and benevolent individual on the autism spectrum. Joseph is the author of, quote, "It's Not Easy Being a Black Man on the Autism Spectrum," a first-person essay featured in Accessibility in Pittsburgh. So if you want to give a visual description of yourself, Joseph.
Hello, my name is Joseph Vernon Smith, and I'm sitting in my room at 7:05 p.m. on a Thursday night, and I'm wearing a Doctor Who polo t-shirt I got for Christmas back in December 25th of 2015. Thanks, Renee. Renee is my sister, and I'm sitting in my chair and stuff that is half broken, and I'm ready to answer all your questions, whatever inquiries you might have, big or small.
Perfect. And finally, we have Bill Wong. Bill is an adjunct faculty at Stanbridge University for its OTA and MSOT programs. He obtained his master's degree in OTD from the University of Southern California in 2011 and 13, respectively. He is the only OT student or practitioner to speak at more than one TEDx event. Bill recently completed his first term as California representative number 2 in the Representative Assembly. Although he works primarily in the skilled nursing facility setting, Bill is collaborating with OT researchers at Western Sydney University, primarily focusing on autistic individuals in middle and older adulthood. Bill remains an active member of the TEDx organizers community. Bill, I don't want to ask you to give a visual description while you're driving, so if you're okay to do that.
So I just pulled over. So yeah, so right now in my car, I would say about 10 minutes away from where I'm supposed to be, from my clinic. So like between now and then I'll be at my clinical space. But yeah, I'm wearing a long sleeve t-shirt because today is very chilly, unusually chilly in Los Angeles. So right now is 4 p.m. here on a Thursday. So we are not in the evening yet. And of course, another thing that I will add is like, well, I'm also currently a member on the Volunteer Leadership Development Committee for AOTA as well. And soon I'm going to take over as the coordinator for the Community of Leaders group in AOTA. So I just want to add to that. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we can dive right into our first prepared question. So our first question is, how does your autistic identity impact your daily life? And so with that, we can start with Elizabeth.
Sure. Hi, everyone again. It's Elizabeth. And for me, this question was tricky because I really have a lot of freedom to kind of accommodate my own needs throughout my life right now, especially with the pandemic. I spend most of my time at home alone with my dog. I would say for me, like, I wanted to give two different kind of answers to this question. And the first one would be like daily life things are, there's certain situations where I experience a lot of sensory overload. Before I found out I was autistic, I would get like very burnt out at work. And I learned it was from sensory overload because for me being part of autistic is I have a vision misalignment. So I wear prism glasses, and if I'm trying to work and move about the day without them, I usually get sick pretty fast, and then I'm not able to do what I need to do. But along with the same vein of not being so certain how to answer this question, because I know I've done so much naturally just to support myself at home, I wanted to just know the impact for me of being identified autistic on my daily life, because it's been about a year almost now that I've known that I am autistic. And so for me, I just wanted to know that like finding out had a really big positive impact on my daily life, because there was a lot about myself sometimes that I thought needed to change, and I was putting in a lot of energy to trying to be a different person than who I am. And so learning that I was autistic like just really helped me is to validate a lot of my own needs and ways of being, and I feel like I get to like live a more empowered life in that way just for myself. So thanks for letting me answer that question.
We can either go in order if someone wants to just jump in and share. Yeah, Joseph.
Well, how autism plays a role in my daily life is like this. I love to take photos and stuff. I like to make ideas on this little mind map I have in front of me with multiple ideas on the way. So, and some of you might not realize that I've been working at Craft and Giant Eagle since Monday, July 10th of 2006. And since then, I have worked 2,326 times and counting as a bagger, helping customers from day to day, helping my fellow employees, helping my fellow customers attain different things. When I see someone needs help, I come running. No matter what time of the day, no matter if I'm in the middle of something, I drop everything and I help the customer no matter what. So yes, I am laser focused on something. If I notice something is off, like, excuse me, miss, you're about to lose your water or your pop, I take initiative and push it back in for them. If I notice someone doesn't wear a mask in the store, I said, please put your mask down or something, and that sort of thing. I notice I make it my mission to help out my fellow coworkers, my fellow customers, no matter what the circumstances are. So that's me in a nutshell when it comes to helping out. And I'm very focused on different things and stuff. I'm focused on my photography. I like to achieve my vision, and among other things. Yes.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to jump in, or I can call on anyone? How about Carly?
Sure. I relate a lot to what both Elizabeth and Joseph said about sort of just finding identity and realizing that I was autistic and in the things that I'm passionate about. For me, discovering that I was autistic about 6-7 years ago, I don't know, Teresa probably remembers, sometime back then, though, really helped me to delve into understanding myself a lot better. And for anyone who's not familiar with like spoon theory and fork theory, those have been really helpful for me to have a concept. So quick summary, spoons are kind of like spell slots, like things you have energy for, and depending on a lot of factors, things can, like making a phone call can take up a lot of spoons. And when you're out of spoons, sometimes you're just out. So understanding that has really helped me to limit the mental health crashes that I used to have. Like obviously mental health is complex and they can still happen, but it's a lot easier when you have some concept of yourself. And then forks are things that make things harder. So especially I think for a lot of autistic people is like that interoception understanding of what's going on with your body. So I've gotten better at, like, if I'm feeling like I'm going to explode over something really small, being like, do I have to go to the bathroom? And honestly, often yes, or like I'm thirsty or something. So that sort of thing has been really helpful for me in sort of feeling more connected to myself and the world, I think.
Thank you. And Amira?
I do relate a lot to what Carly said, especially with the interception part of things. I know since the pandemic began, I've been able to attune into myself more about like, okay, what does my body need? What does my body want? And am I actually going to overwork myself to a point where I'm not going to be able to recover as quickly and stuff? And I also feel like in a conjunction with being deaf, since I do have a cochlear implant, I can usually also figure out how the day's gonna go based on if I'm wearing it or not. So let's say it's not really gonna be a good day for me to wear my implant, but I wear it anyway. That's gonna put me into a shutdown very quickly, and I won't be able to get my tasks done of what I need for the day. So in Carly's example, it would be like a fork. And then if I'm not wearing it for that day, then I can at least keep it off. I also know that being able to unmask really well and just saying I can't separate this for myself has also been able to help me with my schooling, at least now, and hopefully until the rest of the year, hopefully. Yeah.
And Bill, you're the last one.
Hey, Bill, I don't think that we can hear you.
He said that he was having poor reception on Zoom in his car, so he might leave and come back.
I can see Bill, but I just don't think that his audio is working. Oh.
When he rejoins, we can come back to him. And then we'll like circle back to the question. And so if like any of the COTA people, if you see him rejoin, and you can spotlight him, and then we'll go back. Okay, but for now, we can jump into our next question. which is, what does autistic self-advocacy mean to you? And then we can start with Carly.
All right, so for me, I think it involves two categories and both are really important. So the first is self-determination and communication from individual people. So obviously every autistic person and just every person in general has a different experience of things. And it's really important for those voices to be amplified, especially in populations who are marginalized and typically not given the opportunity to speak for themselves that others are having. So some examples of that would be non-speaking people, people with multiple disabilities, BIPOC, etc. And then basically, key point there is that no one is too anything to be allowed to speak for themselves, including and especially if that speech doesn't involve words or the kind of communication that we're familiar with. And then the second that I think is really important is amplifying the collaborative voice of autistic people. So self-advocacy is both advocating on an individual level for oneself and also the groups and collaboratives of autistic people that have been formed to address larger issues that I think can also play a really important role in guiding policy and guiding some understanding on a large societal level.
Hello, can you guys hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I agree with Carly's point earlier about spoons too, because definitely I spend a lot of spoons, whether it's my day job or even like teaching or even doing what I do in an organization level. And I also agree with Carly there about the lifting up voices is concerned. I know for me, I've been around I would say social media on the autism community. I have noticed that it's like the voices, I would say particularly those of us who are autistic, but who are also healthcare professionals, I would say is like definitely is those kind of voices are very, I would say is not very present that very well. I know for me it's like sometimes I know for me with what I've done so far with my career, I almost felt like, well, it's like how come these kind of autism conferences they don't really consider me? It's like because like for me I've been very open about my diagnosis in OT for like about 11 years now. But then it's like in the autism community is still very unknown. It's almost like I guess for me is I guess another point I want to bring up being what does autistic mean to me? It's almost like having a dual identity, so to speak. Because like, well, on the one hand, I'm a professional. On the other hand, I'm also an autistic person. So therefore, it's like sometimes the two worlds they don't coexist. I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't want to ramble on.
Thank you, Bill. And I think we added another question if you wanted to add anything to that of what does autistic self-advocacy mean to you?
Sure, I can definitely answer that too. Yeah, I think I've heard that, but I just didn't have a chance to answer it. Yeah, I think for me, it's like learning how to advocate for myself, particularly I would say at my workplace. So I work in a skilled nursing facility setting, which is like a geriatric setting. And definitely, I know there are times that I definitely need to advocate for myself there because of the fact that I don't do very well with psych patients. So especially psych buildings, so to speak. So for me, somebody like me is like, well, I need to talk to my employers like, hey, you know what? If I know that the building is like a psych building, it's like I sort of understand about the ADA. It's like sometimes it's like, well, if it's last minute, I need to get my hours, that's fine. But if it's a place that I cannot tolerate, I've learned to say to my employers, like, you know what, this is a place that if you put me there, it's like, well, it's not good for you, it's not good for me, it's not good for the patients. So that's why I've learned to advocate for myself that way. And in terms of the educational space, given that now I'm an educator, I think that is also important too, is that sometimes I have to remind my program director or my staff that I'm working with on the faculty. I had to remind them it's like, hey, you know what? Yes, I do a lot of things well, but there's time to time that's like, hey, you know what? Sometimes my social skills I can slip, because I know Amira earlier talked about masking or what autism literature said is called camouflaging. So it's like yes, I camouflage a lot when I am at work, even when I'm on social media space, but definitely self-advocacy is very important because of the fact that it's like, hey, I'm advocating for not only for my job survival, but it's also for my future in my career. Thank you.
Thank you. And so next one, let's go to Amira. What does self-advocacy mean to you?
I probably would think that it might be, if you're in a safe space, to continuing to bring up who you are and like what the issues might be. So I, like Teresa mentioned in my bio, I'm also a part of an intersectional feminist group, and I'm the vice president of that. And I know whenever we've had discussions relating to disability justice as well as stigmas against any psychological disorder, I also continue to bring up autistic issues since, it's not really, I don't know, it's not really where people can have the resources, because there's like that missing link between, okay, here's the person, here's what they want to do, where's that missing piece in between? And that's something that continues that I need to talk more about. And then also, as far as education goes, I just disclosed to my faculty members that I'm autistic as well, and most of them have been pretty supportive about it, since they know that like that's what has affected me with my fieldwork experiences in terms of not being able to get the support needed, and figuring out, okay, here's Samira, here's the fieldwork side, what needs to be filled in so that she can hopefully succeed in that, and then hopefully not have her weaknesses show, since that was also a part of the issue too. And we've been able to work out accommodations and stuff. Yeah, definitely individual, community, and institutional level, that's what self-advocacy means to me.
Great, thank you. Joseph, what does self-advocacy mean to you?
Thanks for the inquiry. What self-advocacy means to me is getting things done ahead of schedule. When I know what I have to, I like to plan ahead. So before the new year began, I gave my manager, Michelle, God bless her. She's good to work with. My entire schedules for the rest of the year, all the way up to 2022 and stuff. I did the same thing with Miss Doris, who is happily retired from the profession. But giving her schedules and stuff and letting her know about different things or something. If I have to request off, I let her know well in advance. Self-advocacy means like standing up for yourself, saying that, you know what, I don't appreciate you calling me certain words and stuff, and it kind of makes people uncomfortable. Like makes like words and stuff. Yeah, certain words, and it deals and different things. I was like, excuse me, I don't appreciate that or something. I don't like to be called boy and stuff because it makes me look, because that is so antiquated, and that different things and stuff. Another thing is paying my rent on time for the rest of the year. That's called being self-advocate. Like getting things done early and stuff, instead of doing things like last minute, I get things done early and stuff. Like I decided to start exercising every day before the pandemic. I have not missed a single day of doing crunches since the first of the year. That sort of thing. That's why being self-advocate and stuff, getting things done early and stuff, getting things ahead of time, and stuff, saying that, hey, I would like to do this or something. Can I do this or something? That sort of thing and stuff. Say, I like to contribute, I like to help out without being asked to do things. That's called being a self-advocate, helping people out and stuff, knowing different things. I'm saying that's called not only advocating for yourself, but advocating for other people who might not have a voice to advocate for.
Thank you, Joseph. And now, last but not least, we have Elizabeth. What does self-advocacy mean to you?
Sure. I really relate to everyone else's answers, and I will just add that a big part of my own autistic self-advocacy has been being visible, because for me it was really important I guess really pivotal to like have access to other visible autistic people, even if I didn't know them, but being able to find other people online who I could relate to. It really shifted things for me as far as like feeling competent, feeling like I can be autistic, and I can also be an occupational therapist, and I can have an independent practice. And I feel like I still know that being visible is a challenge for many people. It's not accessible. It's maybe doesn't seem safe. And I can kind of relate to what Bill is saying, or we're not seeing as many healthcare practitioners. I don't know how true that is. I feel like I know a lot of healthcare practitioners that are not visible, though. I just wouldn't want to generalize it to everybody, but for me, seeing people being visible really helped me to support myself in being visible. And then I feel like I hear from a lot of people who are late diagnosed or questioning whether they might relate to the autistic experience. And to me, it's really important to be, visible for those people, because for me, before I knew I was autistic, I didn't really understand like why I was so burned out at work, or some of the different challenges that I had, and I just thought that all of those things needed to change. But now it's a very different perspective to view those things as being okay and part of who I am, and feeling like able to appreciate and empower myself through that stuff. So that's my piece on being visible.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everyone. Our next question is, what tangible steps can clinicians take to better support autistic clients? And let's start. Sure, Joseph, let's start with you.
Hope hope y'all don't mind. One of the steps that clinicians should start is by using theory of mind. Theory of mind is I've known this, a person named Heather Conway taught me this back in the summer of 14. Theory of mind means putting yourself in the shoes of other people, saying things like how would people perceive you and stuff. So people need to perceive yourself and saying, like, they need to ask questions of, is this okay and stuff? Am I making you uncomfortable? That sort of thing. Hence the term theory of mind. Theory of mind and stuff, and helping and letting people, and first step is letting people know what your accommodations are. So when I was in college, I got season tickets for test taking accommodations up in their special services office at CCAC at Point Park. I scheduled my appointments preemptively to schedule extended test taking accommodations, and it was good. And I had to be very careful and stuff because some people ask me like, what's the answers in the test and stuff. I had to take the back exit to avoid. It's like avoiding the paparazzi and stuff. And people ask questions. Something that's why being careful and stuff about different things like accommodation stuff. Sometimes I struggle being ahead, like doing things and stuff. When a person proctors a test, I want to have the test proctored in a less noisy environment. Like I take my test early and stuff and do things, so I don't have to deal with all this and that.
Thank you, Joseph. Let's do Amira.
I think one big thing that I can definitely think of is that a lot of the autistic diagnostic criteria has been geared toward white young boys and men, rather. So this excludes a lot of people, whether they identify as female, non-binary, transgender, genderqueer, BIPOC, doesn't matter which marginalization. And then also just asking them what they need and just like what they struggle with, and figuring out how to meet them where they're at too, because even though we do have our strengths, we also struggle with this too, and we also need the resources to be able to figure out how we can be able to improve on what we might need to improve on. I also will think that just because something is evidence-based does not mean it's always ethical either. So just listening to the autistic community and even your patient too, just to be able to say, okay, this is actually pretty harmful. What's an approach from a neurodiverse perspective that I can actually use that will actually help benefit my autistic client? And I think that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Mira. Carla, would you like to go next?
Sure. This is a question, this was the one I was most excited about answering. It's something that I'm really passionate about because healthcare is a gateway to so many services and so many aspects of living a satisfying life, from health to being able to provide verification of different needs to a range of things. We've all needed doctor's notes for things. And there are some people whose needs are apparently complex in ways that a lot of medical professionals would rather not deal with or don't understand how to deal with, and it sort of locks that gate, and that can be really hard for people, and I've known people who have died because of it. So some areas that I think are really important that are somewhat easy to integrate are allowing for multiple forms of communication. So enabling a way for people to communicate via email or some other text-based format is usually a good way to go. Requiring phone calls, at least for me and the circles that I run in, knocks out like most of us. So any type of text-based thing is helpful for social stuff as well as for non-speaking people to be able to take some more active role in interacting with healthcare providers. Providing information about what to expect ahead of time is really helpful, both in terms of anxiety and also in terms of allowing people to think about what their own access needs might be and to plan for those and collaborate with people. A third point is that genuine collaboration is really important. I think the world is so full of diverse people that it can sometimes be really hard to understand where someone else is coming from. But genuine collaboration really involves trust on both sides. And I think it's the role of professionals to be the first people to extend that trust and that ideal of collaboration. And then the final thing is using our positions to advocate. There's so much more power, sadly, to other medical professionals in the word of a medical professional as opposed to the actual patient sometimes. And that's awful, but it's also something that a lot of us as healthcare providers are in a role to do something about in terms of documenting fully and adequately what our patients are telling us and what they feel like their needs are. And sorry, my dog is self-advocating in the background.
It's all good.
It's all good.
Thank you. Elizabeth, would you like to go next?
Sure, I can go. And I just want to thank our other panelists because these answers are so great and it's so nice to just collaborate and build together what our answers are. So I really agree with what everyone else is saying. And I just want to emphasize, I think the most important thing is like accessing the autistic community and maybe like realizing for yourself, if you're not autistic, that you might not have had that experience before to the depth that it really needs to happen. And to acknowledge that it's not happening for many people. Many professionals are not, maybe don't even believe it is possible to access the autistic community or that we might have an insight or relate to autistic people. So I would definitely recommend accessing the autistic community in any way that you can. And for healthcare professionals, when they take that step to really practice listening first, because again, like when you are a healthcare practitioner, you come in with the power dynamic that you are the expert and it's there, that system is already there. It's not like a dig at anyone's personality who is a healthcare practitioner, but the system is there that we are supposed to be the experts and have the answers. And so there's this kind of imbalance of power. And I think to really shift that, a big thing that needs to happen is learning to listen and think of the autistic community as experts on themselves and who they are. So if you can, like, learning as much as you can just by listening first before you start to ask your own questions. And because I see people like ask a question and then they get an answer that is so different from what they were expecting that almost turns them away. And then their perception of the support they got from accessing the autistic community is negative. But if you spend some time just listening first, and let what you learn as you're listening start to shape your curiosities, maybe like you're forming new questions in your mind, and then preparing yourself to learn things that you might not have realized or thought about before about our community.
Thank you. And Bill.
All right, I guess I'm last. So I think as Elizabeth and everybody else has mentioned, everybody has given very good answers. So from my perspective, I guess I can speak from my perspective as a leader of the OT profession. So one thing I also did not mention in the intro is that I'm also an active member of the AOTA Autism Community of Practice. And out of this group so far, I think there are about 10 to a dozen of us. I would say is like, out of that is like, there's only one autistic adult, which is myself right now. So therefore it's like, I think it's like, I know Elizabeth mentioned about access to the autism community. I think it's like, it is like, so I'm speaking from an organizational point of view from AOTA, because like, I heard that the Autism Community of Practice, I know last year we released a document called the Autism Opportunities Roadmap, which is a collaboration with that Autism Community of Practice and several autistic occupational therapists. And right now they're trying to make some steps to make it more inclusive for autistic individuals. I know one prime example that we actually talked about Tuesday at the AOTA Inspire conference because we had a booth. So one thing we actually talked about is like, well, with AOTA community of practice, one of the requirements is like, well, the professional members have to be a member of AOTA. And I sort of thought like, well, this is not really accessible for autistic people who are outside of OT or who are not AOTA members. So one of the things that we came up with as a tangible example is like, well, maybe we cannot get autistic individuals from the community to be AOTA members. Maybe one of the design is to have an advisory board to sort of get around the requirement that AOTA has for these kind of community of practice. And they also says like, well, to make it not as a symbolic gesture, so to speak, but the fact that there will be somebody who really listens. So I was like, Bill, we would like, if there's an advisory board, we would like to be a co-chair. So that is like, you can help bridge the gap between us professionals and the autistic community. So of course for me is like, and I think for me, maybe my case is a little bit different because I'm also a leader in the profession. So I sort of wear many different hats in that community practice. So for me in that one is like, I would say if compared to, I would say I'm relatively more well received given that I'm well connected in the OT profession, whether it's AOTA or is my connections with the autism community is concerned. So it's like they sort of treat me as the bridge. But hopefully hopefully the OT community don't see myself as the poster child of what an autistic individual should look like, because everybody's different.
Thanks, Bill. I don't know if you saw the chat, but some of our other panelists, like Elizabeth and Mira, were saying like, no, we want to join you for the AOTA.
Yes, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, as long as you're an AOTA member.
Thanks. All right. Our next question is, what are the best parts of being autistic? And we can start with Amira.
Okay.
I think Joseph raised his hand, so if you want to go ahead, I'm okay.
No, I'll let you go. I'll let you go. Stuff. I can wait for the next one. It's all good. You can go.
Okay. To be honest with you, this one's actually kind of a thinker, but I think for me, my favorite parts of being autistic are like there's actually like terminology in the autistic community that I can actually use and define, like with stimming and stuff. With stimming, like I can use that to describe how I'm feeling, and then also for me, I really like to make a lot of connections and stuff that like a lot of people just really don't understand, but I'm also like, okay, I'm can actually go from here to here to here to here to here to here, go from A to Z right there. But I think a lot of people get confused, so I'm like, okay, now I can actually do, all right, I'll take you from A to B and then B to C and then go all the way to Z to, that's how I made the connection. But I think those are my two favorite parts of being autistic. And then again, of course, the online community, which really does help with connecting with other autistic individuals.
Okay, for me, the best, okay, sorry. For me, the best part of being autistic is being yourself and knowing your truth. The truth is and stuff that I'm a very sensitive and caring person, and I'm very sensitive to the needs of others and stuff, and especially what's been happening all across the globe with the deaths of people of my hue. It's really started to give me hyper aware of my surroundings from here on in. Not to be over focused on one thing and stuff and be aware of my surroundings. Now, don't get me wrong, I get over focused from time to time, but with what's been going on with all the with this, I'm trying to be aware of my surroundings and stuff, and that's what being autistic for me is all about. And the best part of being autistic is knowing when to ask for help, because it is not, asking for help doesn't make you weak. Asking for help is a valuable asset. That's what the best part of being autistic is, and also being able to remember things and stuff, and being able to use your own terminology and stuff. And I, like, for example, I'm a giant eagle. I bag for people and stuff, and I was like, would you like that double fortified, your bags double fortified? And I was like, and also, do you, when someone has a pop or an item, do you plan on consuming those things promptly? I can leave them out for you and stuff. Do you need help to your vehicle? Because I notice people needs help different times and stuff, different times of the day or something. Because I notice when I see a large grocery, like, excuse me, do you need help or something? I even give a card for the floral delivery man on Monday morning when he comes in preemptively. I even offer to give people cards and stuff when they come back in. I offer to wipe down their handles and stuff since we're in the pandemic. And among other things and stuff, I watch the news and stuff to become aware of the surroundings and stuff. I even look at the CDC website from time to time. I haven't done it in a while. But the thing is and stuff, I want to be aware of what's happening in the news or something, because I've been watching videos like from Damar Man or something, and video chronicles and stuff to learn about humanity and stuff, about how we treat people and stuff, like help against anti-racism and stuff, and against people with ill intent. I'd like to watch these videos as research because I want to learn more about humanity, so you know what to do when the time is right. I'm aware of the needs of others. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few and the one. It's a reference from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Spock before he makes a sacrifice. Spoiler. Sorry. So that's
No
what
worries.
being autistic is all about.
I don't. Yeah.
Are there any
Sorry
other
about that.
inquiries?
Yeah, I
Sorry.
thought you.
Any other inquiries? And when it comes to like being a human or something, I'm gonna tell everyone in this meeting, it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, it doesn't matter what your gender is, doesn't matter what your sexual orientation is, what your identity is, doesn't matter what your ethnicity is, what you like. Everyone deserves, what your political views are, everyone deserves to be treated with vulnerability and benevolence. If anyone violates your boundaries in any way, you have the right to enforce your sovereignty of people who you let in your life and who treat you. You have the right to be treated with benevolence and vulnerability. So no one has the right to overstep your boundaries and any means of the imagination, any means. I don't care what time or day it is or anything. I don't care what century you're in. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect. Period. Simple as that. It doesn't matter what your well, if you're autistic or neurodiverse or neurotypical, everyone deserves to be treated with respect, period, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Bill, did you want to go next?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were done. I thought you were done, man. Sorry. So,
Good.
but anyway, so yeah. So for my answer, I guess, is like finding out I'm autistic. I think that for me, when I found out my diagnosis, I realized that there is a world of possibilities for me to make a difference in the OT profession. But I guess one of the things that I constantly hear over and over is like, oh, well, one of the things that you gotta do if you want to make a difference like this, especially to share knowledge, is like, well, you need to get your license first. So in 2012, that's what I did. And I think for me, it started really small at my state level because I want to see like if my message is actually well received. And then I progressed to AOTA. I even submitted to conferences abroad. I think that being able to, I guess it's like being able to find meaning to my career, I think that would be my answer in terms of what makes autism special for me. Because I think it's like, it sort of adds meaning to my career as an occupational therapist. And I think it's also like, well, another thing I enjoy is like, well, I guess now my parents cannot judge me really about like having some me time because they realize that it's like, well, my day to day, they require a lot of snooze. So being able to retreat in my room after I'm done with my workday or after a long series of Zoom meetings, whatever, is like they understand that I need my share of quiet space to unwind and prepare for the next day. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Elizabeth, would you like to go next?
Sure, I can go. I love this question. I'm really glad that it was asked. For me, I am really grateful that I got diagnosed autistic when I was ready to like celebrate that as part of myself. So for me, like some of my favorite things are really understanding the benefit of leaning into my interests. So some of my interests are gardening, and I know, at least with the pandemic, I haven't been around as many people to have it so apparent to me, like how much more I like to garden and grow flowers than other people. But there's just this whole part of it for me that is like very restorative to my brain of like the organization of it all and arranging it and trying to figure out like how I will grow the most flowers and vegetables in the spaces that I have. So I'm going to a community garden this summer, so I'll have like my own gardening space at home, and then I can go for a walk like a couple blocks away and have a garden space there. And for me, that's like just like the right amount of social interaction to be like in my garden space, and then there's other people maybe around me who enjoy gardening too. But I just never realized like how restorative being able to lean into some of those things would be for me. And then also stimming, like realizing how restorative stimming could be. And for me, like before I was sort of framing it as an issue, but now it's just kind of like, no, this would be a great way to let some of my like amped or frenzied energy out. Like I love to put like music on like headphones and listen to like familiar favorite songs and walk through grocery stores. So I really like local food stores, different like co-ops and things I like to know. And when I've done some traveling, so when I go across the country, like I would always want to find like the local food co-op or something and just kind of walk through and see how it's arranged. It's kind of like a visual stim with auditory, with like listening to music. So those for me, like completely outside of my profession, just learning to understand like what the meaning of all of that was for me was really nice. And then just to add to what people are saying about being able to support other people, when I found out I could tell so many stories about just the difference in relating to a lot of the children on my caseload. And I just feel like some of them had never experienced like someone really appreciating their interests in an authentic way, especially because I work a lot in the school environment. And so I work in a setting where kids are always being asked to learn to put their interests to the side and focus on the task at hand and getting things done. And just being able to help kids like bring their interests into the session. Like I have kids now who are like writing stories about the things that they love, and now they know how to use spell check and they can turn in homework assignments and things by themselves. But it took a lot of time, but the way we did it was really leaning into what they enjoy. And I can just tell at like a deeper level to have that experience of sharing a relationship with someone who is really authentically valuing their interests. And for me, it was like it went to the next level for me of being able to validate others once I realized it for myself. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Carly.
I think everyone else covered this pretty well, but I definitely agree about leaning into community. And I know there's that whole section of like labels are for soup cans, but soup cans are well organized and you can find what you need. And I appreciate that. And I've appreciated that about autism and just the language around autism as well, is that there's a lot. It's been really nice after a whole lifetime of feeling just sort of off to just be able to find and access communities and know the language to seek out these communities of people who share a common thread. So I guess that's more knowing that I'm autistic than being autistic, but it goes together. And also stimming is very cool. Like I don't know what other people's experiences are of stimming, because I imagine everyone does some degree of that, but like I'm sitting here right now with my soft fabric and it's just amazing the impact that something like that can have on just making your whole body feel nice, and that's pretty cool. Oh, and everyone has their stim stuff. Yay! Stim party.
Awesome.
All right, thank you to all the panelists for answering our specific questions. I've had you guys have been sending me personalized questions for our panelists, and you guys are still able to send me questions. However, if you would also like to, you're able to raise your hand and we will call on you to unmute. But so if you have a question, you can either continue to send it to me in that manner, or you could raise your hand and we will call on you. But to get it started, I do have a question. Which any panelist can answer, which was, what is your advice for autistic clinicians or autistic people trying to decide whether or not to disclose to supervisors or others in positions of power in their programs or clinics or places of work? Please go ahead, Joseph.
Okay, my advice to autism clinicians and people with autism stuff is don't be afraid to tell them, hey, I have autism. I remember one time back in 03, back in early 2003, I slid on a cup. I did a cavalier mood with my friend and I at a camping trip. I slid on ice or something, and my butt was hurting and stuff. So I went to the hospital and stuff, and it was then and there that I found out that I have autism. At age 15 and stuff. My parents didn't tell me because they wanted to stop me from achieving my primary objectives of getting things done and stuff, and not to lose my disability as excuse for not to accomplish things. I was like, cool, I don't mind. I'm like, I just went on with it and stuff. And it was a couple of days later I got sick and stuff, and because of trying to recover and stuff, but that's not important. It was good. I found out I had autism, and I decided, you know what? I don't care. I'm just gonna live my life and live life to the fullest and stuff, however God intended. And my advice to you is don't be afraid to tell people you have autism or something, no matter what it is or something. If people cannot accept that you have autism, then they're not worth dealing with. Because I remember one time back in the summer of 16, it was after I returned from film camp. I had a little bit of a confrontation with a coworker in front of a customer over different things because I like to help people out no matter what or something. And one of my managers came in and stuff. We talked about this and stuff about different things. And I declassified the piece of information that I had autism to the manager and stuff. He didn't know that and stuff. And he accepted it. And since then, I've not been afraid to tell people I have autism and stuff whenever it comes up. When I see an autism sticker on a car and somebody walking through an aisle or something, that sort of thing. I'm sensitive to the needs of others and something, and make sure. And people find out about it when I wrote that article in the Pitt paper, the Tribune review about my autism. It's called Camera Not Autism. Pretty good read. I'll post it in the chat later. Yes.
Okay, I just waited. I don't waited before like you. I don't want to do like last question. So are you good?
I'm good. Yes, please proceed, please. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. That's like I don't want to do a repeat of the last question. So for me, I have a different answer because of the fact that, well, I am searchable on YouTube, given that I've done 2 TEDx talks as a speaker. So especially my first one on my bio for that TEDx talk, it definitely mentioned that I'm autistic. So definitely it's like, well, I have accepted as public knowledge. So therefore it's like, well, so basically I guess my situation now is like, well, if my coworkers find out, I know in some settings like, well, you're only supposed to disclose your diagnosis to your supervisors. But in my case, it's more like, well, if my coworkers, they just happen to find myself on YouTube and watch that video, they were like, well, I just shrug my shoulders to my supervisor, like, well, it's like, I cannot stop them looking me up on YouTube. So that's my answer, I guess. Yeah, so let's see what else. I would say also, like, in terms of, I know you mentioned your point about disclosing to everyone. I know for me, when I teach in a classroom, I definitely mention that to my students. I would say probably at least a couple weeks, if not more, per term. I think that it's in the classroom setting, especially considering that I'm teaching leadership and management. I think it sort of adds another layer because people realize that, like, wow, what you're doing in the OT profession is very phenomenal. And then on top of that, it's like, wow, I cannot imagine how much harder it can be for you, given that you are autistic, because some of the positions that you're doing they are really socially demanding. So I think that it really sort of, I guess it's sort of bring out the introverted students a little bit more also in the class, because they realize that, like, hey, Dr. Wong is autistic and he definitely dealt with being an introvert, but yet here he is. So I think that it sort of is a very concrete example that they can be successful. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Sure. I just want to say I put a video in the chat, and it's a conversation from the UC Mind Institute. And I know that Dr. Jacqueline Feedy was involved in that conversation, and a few other autistic adults who shared. Some of them shared stories about being self-disclosing at work. And I think that I just want to validate anyone who is concerned about self-disclosing at work, because I feel that for people who it's not public knowledge, and your supervisor might not be able to access like many talks or professional accolades that you've done, related to being autistic online. And so that could make you more hesitant, because they're not going to see like, oh, look, you can do this, you're so great, and you're also autistic. So I just want to validate anyone who is concerned about it, but at the same time, to me, like where I'm at in my life, I don't want to work somewhere where I would feel concerned about self-disclosing. I want to work in an inclusive work environment, and I hope that some of my self-advocacy can be part of making work environments more inclusive for other people. because I think that's really important, and I think we do have a lot to offer. And you, as an autistic person, anyone out there who is one, you do have a lot to offer in your work setting. Being autistic doesn't mean that you can't work there. So just to acknowledge, like, there is a lot of work to be done, but I think leaning into other people who have kind of led the way and are self-disclosing at work and have learned enough about the accommodations and things that they need to be successful at work, kind of like leaning in and surrounding yourself in that world can be really helpful to prepare you if it's something you decide you're going to do.
If I can follow up on Elizabeth's point, they had a really good point about speaking up about accommodations and stuff, and I would say that's probably the big thing, especially if you're concerned about whether you're going to try to find a job or whether you're starting your fieldwork or clinical. You have a right to accommodation, and to be able to get those accommodations that you need in order to be able to successfully thrive. Also does help too to be able to know like what your skill sets are and what your strengths are, because otherwise you might get into a complete mismatch and ultimately not be able to thrive in that environment. I also would say too, like, thinking about what your goal is with disclosing might help too, because if it might mean, hey, you might get more accommodations and supports needed to get you through your studies, then go for it. If you're concerned about disclosing and then getting pushback from faculty or somebody else, that's also your choice too. I can speak from experience that I did not disclose until my third year, and sometimes I did wish that I had disclosed right before I started my OT program, because I think that actually would have given me a lot more support and to be able to be more as motivated, because I think that it would have definitely helped me feel more confident in my abilities to become an occupational therapist too.
Wow.
All right, so if no one has anything else to add, we can go to our next question we got. I think this is in reference to something Amira said earlier, but anyone can join. Can you speak more on evidence-based practices that are unethical or harmful for the autistic community? They would love to know any examples or things to avoid.
I don't really have the research about this, but I can tell that there is stigma about the autism community. So sometimes people claim that autism is a curse, but it's really a gift. And being a board member on the Autism Connection for Pennsylvania has taught me about being an advocate, and stuff. Speaking of unethical practices and stuff, because the board works on helping people with autism help to become advocates for themselves and saying and not making assumptions, saying, oh, this person is messed up, he shouldn't be doing this or something, making half but statements about people's disability instead of saying that, oh, this person's weird or something. Because that sort of thing, you have to help everyone out and stuff. It's not about you, it's about helping other people wherever they need it, you know.
Thank you, Joseph. Carly, I saw you had your hand raised too.
Yes, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. So I think the one that comes to a lot of our minds is ABA, probably. So ABA is applied behavior analysis, which is usually a way of training through discrete trials or like quick interactions that have more often now a reward leaning, but it's very much adult-led and very much training specific behaviors. So pro ABA people who are often having some financial benefit from that, I do want to point out, are, and sometimes not. I mean, there are a lot of people who want to believe that they are doing well by their children, students, clients, whoever, and it is easy to construe the evidence in a way that makes it look like these therapies are beneficial to autistic people and that they are evidence-based. But I think the important thing to keep in mind with those is what kind of outcome measures are being used. They're often very specific. We'll learn how to do this specific task over a long period of time. And a lot of autistic adults and people who have been through ABA talk about how they feel that it has taken away their ability to advocate for themselves, and that they were pressured into being a certain way and conforming in a way that capitalism wanted them to, and that the people who were doing it to them wanted them to. And so I also, this was something I thought a lot about in grad school, how evidence-based practice has those 3 pillars. And one of them is client perspectives. And I think that gets swept under the rug a little bit when people are talking about ABA in defense of it, but should be focused on more, because if you're saying that your client isn't able to advocate for themselves and you're not taking their intense emotional reactions as advocating for themselves, then it makes sense, I think, to supplement that with the voices of the autistic community who are often largely critical of ABA.
I just want to second what Carly is saying, and thank you for providing such a detailed answer for everyone. And I just kind of want to fall back on the answer I gave earlier about like really validating other people's ways of being, and thinking about whether the intervention that you're doing is doing that. Or if it's asking them to kind of constantly be reminded that what they're doing is not acceptable or not okay by other people. And I just think it's so important as providers for us to be really checking in about whether we are, like everything Carly said, like validating our clients' needs, and whether we do truly know how to take their perspective and give it the weight that it deserves in evidence-based practice compared to research. So thanks.
Yeah, I think it's like, you know what, Carly just does a good job. I don't want to say anything more. Thank you.
Straight to the point.
Thank you guys for providing that insight. I really appreciate it. If no one else would like to add on to that, I'd like to move on to another question that I really enjoy, which is there any fatigue that comes with having to continuously advocate for you and your community? How can allies take a more active role in everyday practice to help alleviate that burden?
I guess I'll start this one.
Go.
For me as an OT, I think that in the OT profession, from what I've seen over the social media space, I think like what Elizabeth talked about earlier about being visible in the OT profession, I think that the landscape has improved in terms of more OT students and practitioners are coming out that they're autistic. I think this is a welcome sign. And hopefully that I would say is like, in terms of representation, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done. I think that's why I bring back to the community of practice comment with AOTA. I think that maybe it's like with the fact that I'm in it in the community of practice, and now I'm establishing myself as a backbone of that community of practice. So hopefully that maybe other disciplines can actually take a look at what OT is doing. It is a very small scale in the US, but it is something that maybe they can look at. It's like, hey, in OT, this is working, because maybe they can do a test analysis and knows like why this is working in OT, but why is it not there in other professions yet? So I would say definitely is like, and then of course also another thing, we talk about allyship. I think that autism conferences, at least from my experiences, I would say definitely should consider inviting autistic clinicians to actually speak at their conferences. You know, I know for me, as in terms of what keeps me going, I guess I'll be unashamed to say it. So I am actually aiming for the FAOTA distinction, which is a fellow of AOTA, which is one of the highest distinction of being an OTR. Definitely, that's one of my goals within the next 10 years, sorry. So that's something that I'm aspiring to do. I think that's what kept me going. And now, of course, being in the Volunteer Leadership Development Committee, so that actually provides me a measuring stick in terms of like what I've done so far versus like what I have to go. But anyway, in terms of allyship, I would say it's like, yeah, I think it's like the autism conferences, I think they definitely should make an effort to hear the voices, not only from autistic people, but autistic people who have the clinical knowledge to sort of be the bridge between the clinicians in such conferences and the autistic self-advocates in maybe at the panelists or in the audience, or maybe family in the audience. I think finding such voices is key. I know for me, one example of that done was like outreaching to Dr. Lawrence Fung from the inaugural Stanford Neurodiversity Summit. When I mentioned to him that I was like, hey, you know, how come you don't invite autistic clinicians as a speaker for your summit? And then he realized like, you know, the reason is because like, I don't know anyone like yourself, you know? So if you can help us, you know, we definitely will be glad to. So sometimes I guess like for those of us who are autistic clinicians, sometimes it's like, if we don't feel we're represented, sometimes we just have to speak out. Thank you.
When it comes,
Go ahead, Joseph.
sorry. Okay. I'll let you go next, I promise.
It's fine, Joseph. You could go.
Hey, thank you. Just making sure. When it comes to autism, there is fatigue and stuff dealing with a lot of, you all heard of the term doom scrolling. I've been doing some research about news or something about different topics and stuff, and it causes fatigue hearing about people getting killed in gun violence due to racism, due to hatred of all kinds. And it does cause fatigue and stuff because it causes a lot of stress on me and stuff, seeing videos about people of my hue being accused of being criminals or something in the news, like saying like that, remember that video that went viral about this person in the park that recorded a man that was walking and stuff, and she said, this person's attacking me, and it really kind of ticked me off and stuff, and made me mad as Hades or something, because people can be capable of spreading false allegations. So I'm very careful about what I say on social media, what I do in public, and how I do things. Yes, I get angry from time to time, but I'm very careful. I will never hurt anyone. I'm very conscientious and stuff. But some people think that, oh, I'm a person of color, I'm going to hurt somebody and stuff. I was bullied in high school, and my family taught me not to hurt anyone in anger and stuff, because it can be misinterpreted and have a criminal record and stuff. That's why if I would have done this, I would have been sitting with you guys today talking about these topics that I have to be very conscious about how I approach things and stuff. Especially, you got people making false allegations about me because of color of my skin, and it's really horrible, and it's sad. People can make allegations of autistic people because they do things weirdly, you know. It's because someone said, oh, the people with autism do things weirdly and stuff. I don't think it's weird. It's part of who I am, that sort of thing. Huh? Yeah. That sort of thing. That's about it.
Thanks, Joseph, for sharing that. I want to add a little bit to the question about fatigue, and like what I can talk a little bit about being a provider and being in other circles of providers that are not autistic. It could be really helpful, like for providers, like we said, to access the autistic community and have an understanding of what it might be like to be an autistic healthcare practitioner. I know that I've been part of a lot of conversations that happen where the people talking do not realize that an autistic person might be there. And so I hear like myself othered, or our community very much othered, like we wouldn't be part of that conversation. And then when I'm in those situations, what happens is I want to self-disclose, but then I also don't want the attention and the whole like emotional reaction that happens when people do realize that an autistic person is there. So to me, the people I feel most comfortable like being around provider wise are people who are like well aware of the autistic community and our different stances and things on different therapies and practices in healthcare and what it really means to go beyond like acceptance. So another thing is like for people to respond and like want you to kind of justify your diagnosis when you share that, like they want to hear a lot more, like and then, I've had a lot of experiences where I tell stories about like my childhood or something, and I'll say, oh, yeah, when I found out I was autistic, I realized like this thing that happened when I was a kid kind of contributes to my autistic experience. And I have a lot of experience with providers who are really quick to want to separate my experience from the autistic experience. So they want to go right into like, oh, but that doesn't mean, that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're autistic. And, or I've had that experience too. And I have been autistic my whole life, even though I didn't know it. So any story that I tell about myself is about me being autistic. And it doesn't mean that I'm talking about a time when I had a problem, because I'm talking about being autistic. I'm talking about my whole life, my whole self. So I think, that for non-autistic providers making that shift, that not every story that a person will tell about autism is about a problem that they're having in life or something that's pathologized or disordered. They're just telling a story about, who we are ourselves. So those kinds of things, like I think if non-autistic providers were more aware of that, like, and that I experienced that and maybe other healthcare providers experience that, it might be not such a big like emotional challenge to self-disclose at work and be more visible and vocal about like my ideas.
Amira or Carly, did you want to jump in at all with that one? Or we can go to the next question.
You can go to the next one for me.
You can go.
All right, so our other question is, what advice would you give to someone who was recently diagnosed as autistic? And how do you recommend talking about or educating family and friends of newly diagnosed autistic people, especially if diagnosed later in life?
All right. I guess there's a silence. I guess I'll go again. If that's okay. So
Okay.
for me, I was diagnosed at 25. So one thing I would guess is like, one thing I would say is like, definitely don't, I would advise the families as well, since you talk about later in life. So definitely don't put all the responsibilities in terms of self-advocating to the autistic individuals themselves. I know my parents did, because at that time their logic was like, well, you are going to be an OT, this is like, hey, you probably know more about autism than we do. Why do we have to learn about support groups? Why do we have to learn about your meds that you might take? Why do we have to learn all the other stuff that you have to learn? I think that one of the things I would suggest is definitely make it a collaborative process. I think that is very important. Second thing I think is, one of the things that I've learned, I guess, is to have a very good support system. This is very important. I sort of use, when I tell autistic people, especially my peers who are autistic, I just use a baseball analogy. It's like, imagine yourself as a pitcher, you know, like a starting pitcher, and your objective is to win a ball game, you know? So like, for some people, for some pitchers, they're like the hard luck pitchers, right? It's like they can pitch really good, but then they don't have the offensive support, and then they end up losing the ball game. Versus conversely, there's some pitchers who pitch very lousy, but because their team have a lot of support in terms of offense is concerned. So therefore, it's like, hey, you know, they still get the W. And you know what? Your objective in life is to get that W, to win wherever stage of life you are, whether it's short term or long term. So I would say it's like definitely get a good support system. And also another one is make sure you have some time to grieve or adjust to your new normal, quote unquote. I know personally, when I found out my diagnosis, it was 3 days before I began my second year of OT school. So you can imagine, for those of you guys in the audience, right, in the second year of OT school or for graduate school level, there's a lot of reading, there's a lot of work. So for me, it's like, I remember spending the first 3-4 weeks, was like, I mustered all the energy I could and I just to study. I didn't really have much energy to do anything else. I think it's like giving yourself time to grieve is important. And the thing is also like, you know what, is find your strengths and also being aware of your weaknesses. I think over time, learning how to play to your strengths is going to be very important. I know for myself in terms of me, so I know we talk about being a leader in the OT profession. One of the things that I know that's like, hey, at the very beginning, I'm not very good at initiating conversation with other people. So I was like, well, to sort of counteract that and to reduce the likelihood of having awkward conversations when I meet these people, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use social media space, get to know people that I might meet at the conferences, and just like, so that when I do meet them in person, I can feel like I don't miss a beat. So I guess it's like some of the things that you guys will learn in OT is like, hey, find adaptive or compensatory strategies. I think that's another one that to teach autistic adults is to find some way to either learn how to use your strengths or to work around your weaknesses. And I'm gonna leave that for now so that the other panelists can contribute. Thank you.
I would like to say this and stuff. When someone has been given a diagnosis that under the revelation that you're autistic, here's my advice to you: is don't stop living your life. Continue to be yourself, and don't let autism define you. Being kind to other people defies you, and you got to live your life of hope, love, compassion, inspiration, happiness, benevolence, and continue to be your best self. That's my sense to it.
I can add a little bit too, just about because I still haven't been diagnosed for a whole year yet. And I guess when I'm hearing the word grief, it's like the grief that I experienced was just not knowing, realizing how long that I hadn't known, and wondering, you know, like, did anybody else know? Was this something people were afraid to talk to me about? And as I've gone on and realized, like, I kind of remember more and more about like my childhood and growing up autistic and not knowing. And for me, it's made a lot more sense, which is validating, but also like I said, there is some grief for me to having not known and not being able to affirm that part of myself sooner. But as far as like advice for if you are a newly diagnosed autistic adult, I would say like surrounding yourself as much as you can with you know, people or stories that you find affirming. There's lots of access to that online. And for me, it's been really important. I feel like I do have a lot of supportive people in my life, but there's still like the majority, like dominant paradigm about autism is still very negative. And so even people in my life that are very well-meaning and are trying, like, still are not able to provide that kind of like affirming support that I need. Like, they still might kind of approach me like, well, maybe you're not autistic, you know, and that's like very invalidating. So yeah, I just, for myself, like when I get into those moments, it's like time for me to go listen to, you know, one of my favorite autistic adults talk about their story online a little bit and just remind myself that my experience is valid. And for me, finding out has really improved the quality of my life and like how I think about myself so much. So yeah, and no one, like, that's my own individual experience that no one can really question.
I also really relate to what you're saying with that, Elizabeth, and just, I think there's a large section of people who just don't really have a full grasp of what autism does look like and can look like. And so I think especially early in diagnosis, for me, it was easy to feel sort of like, am I really, or am I just over exaggerating my own experiences? And so I did like the most autistic thing possible and just wrote myself a whole letter, like listing all of the experiences. And I imagine that that experience is especially common for people who are starting self-diagnosed or who, for whatever reason, don't have access to medical diagnosis, especially because, like I think Amira mentioned, a lot of medical diagnosis is like, are you a 4-year-old boy who likes trains? And if you're not, you're going to be a little bit hard pressed to get the diagnosis. So I just want to emphasize that, like, if you identify with the autistic community, you're not taking anything away from anyone by doing that, and you're adding yourself to it. And if there's a group of people with similar experiences to yours who have found ways to live their best lives, it's totally cool and great and reasonable to join into that community and let your self-discovery be what it is, including if you discover that you're not autistic and you're a cousin, or that you are. I think there's a lot of freedom in just letting yourself be and ending up where you end up. And I'm kind of rambling, so I'm going to mute myself again.
I love everyone's answers. I think everyone did a really excellent job with this question and these questions. I do want to add and say, like, for families and like anybody in their support system, 2 resources that I highly recommend would be looking at Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, since those are more autistic ran and they give you a lot of really good information about resources on, like, oh, I think Bill left. Okay. Yeah. So they're autistic ran and they provide a lot of resources on, like, what's the next step, what else can you look at, and then also just being able to figure out, like, what other difficulties the autistic people might go through and stuff like that. I'm not late diagnosed. I was actually diagnosed earlier, but I didn't find out until I was 10. I think, like, there's gonna be those few moments where I'm like, am I actually autistic or am I faking it? You're still autistic all the way, no matter what happens. So congratulations on getting the diagnosis. Come join the autistic party.
And also, always have a good support system no matter what. They'll stick through you through Hades and high water. So you're not alone. Always remember, you're not alone. The universe is big, so you're not alone. Thanks for this evening. Thank you for having all of us.
Thank you guys so much for speaking and being so authentic and so honest with your answers during this. I think it's a benefit to everyone who's come here and people who are going to watch this. And we really thank you for taking the time out just to share a little piece of yourself and your experiences. So on behalf of the COTAD Pitt chapter, we want to thank you guys for joining us. Tiffany put in the chat, we have a feedback form, which we would ask you guys to fill out. It's in order to gauge how this event went, to plan future events, because we're always just trying to improve and see what kind of things we want to discuss as we're trying to grow and expand our minds together. So thank everyone for joining. We appreciate your time. And again, thank you so much to the panelists who have been amazing.
Thank you. And have a benevolent evening and a benevolent tomorrow as well.
Have a wonderful evening and also weekend, because it's almost the weekend. And thank you again, everybody. We really appreciate you.